In the third section of the fourth module, we're going to look at community acceptance of wastewater reuse projects and some aspects of behavioural change associated with it. Community perceptions and acceptance are complicated and can depend on many different and interrelated factors and are an important determiner for the success of a project. It's also important to recognise that different sections of a community may have different perceptions and levels of acceptance than others, and this may contribute to divisions or mistrust within a community. Some common factors associated with low community acceptance of water reuse projects include the fear of health consequences, particularly for those in direct contact with water or those who may consume produce in contact with recycled water. However, it's not necessarily those in direct contact that will have the strongest or most influential opinions. The fear of social and economic consequences may be associated with changes in land or property values following project implementation. Wastewater, particularly untreated wastewater, can be associated with odours, unpleasant appearance, uncleanliness and disease, which can induce a strong disgust response from people who do not want to be associated with these things in their community. Cultural and religious beliefs may play a crucial role in community perceptions and can influence the fear level of the previous two factors, regardless of the level of actual risk. In many places around the world, including in Muslim-majority countries, where untreated wastewater has traditionally been used for irrigation due to climate and economic necessity, there does not appear to be a significant level of revulsion to the practice, although it does exist. The 2006 WHO guidelines on water reuse identify that wastewater use in many Islamic countries was judged to be acceptable provided that the impurities present in raw wastewater are removed. This judgment was issued as a fatwa in 1978 by the Council of Leading Islamic Scholars of Saudi Arabia. Additional factors include the perception of unfairness in allocation of resources. It is crucial for community acceptance that the development of a project is fair in regard to who benefits and that it is also seen to be fair. Distrust in local managers or of the decision makers of the project may make this difficult or impossible depending on the history of relations with the communities affected. A typical pattern observed is that the public is more likely to accept wastewater reuse where there is a perception that there will be limited contact with the treated wastewater. This is shown in the figure from a study from the USA, where activities such as firefighting and golf course irrigation were accepted by more than 80% of the respondents, whereas laundry use was accepted by only around 40%, and refilling of recreational reservoirs and groundwater recharge that may impact drinking water supplies received less than 20% acceptance. The rates of acceptance will change from place to place and also with time. Many countries have seen higher rates of acceptance as water reuse practices have become more visible and mainstream. However, the correlation of acceptance with lower direct contact with treated wastewater persists. In Australia, a severe 10-year drought period in the 2000s, called the Millennium Drought, saw strict water restrictions imposed in many places and generally positive media attention to water scarcity solutions, like water reuse, became common. During this period, Australians became more receptive to reusing treated wastewater for various uses, including garden watering and cleaning uses, showing the role that climatic conditions and positive media coverage can play in changing people's attitudes. A 2020 study in Nigeria saw that attitudes to water reuse can change somewhat depending on education level. People with a university education level generally were more willing to accept wastewater reuse, and these people being more likely to trust a proposed water reuse project if it was endorsed by medical doctors, university professors, or experts. Another study in Lebanon from 2018 found a significant association between religious beliefs and respondents' willingness to use treated wastewater. Interviewees who thought that treated wastewater reuse is not religiously accepted were, on average, 2 times less likely to use treated wastewater as compared to those who did not believe that reuse contradicts their religious beliefs. These last 2 studies also found a general lack of trust in governing institutions and authorities in their respective countries, which could partly explain their elevated level of perceived health risk. It's important to keep in mind that negative public opinion can derail projects even when advanced wastewater treatment is proposed and actual health risks are very low. With respect to irrigation projects, the public must have confidence that the food they are consuming will in no way be detrimental to their health. There are many steps project proponents and managers can take to improve community understanding of a project and also their attitudes towards it. Community outreach programs should be started as early as possible during the planning of a project, and they should be based on a comprehensive understanding of the people that will be affected. Specific stakeholders and stakeholder groups should be identified and targeted engagement and action plans should be developed. Potential users and others that will be affected by the project or by the project works should be identified and contacted as early as possible during the planning phase. Community advisory committees should be formed that contain representatives from all the main stakeholder groups and public hearings held to ensure open access to information and transparency. Efforts to inform, educate, and involve the community should be proactive, not only reactive if problems occur or when complaints are made. This proactivity and effort in being seen to be transparent with information will help to build trust in the project process and the people managing it. It's not always possible for community members and stakeholders to participate meaningfully in all aspects of project development and in regard to all technical questions. However, where project owners have decided for community consultation, it must be meaningful with the possibility that the community can have an impact on aspects of the project. If the consultation resembles simply listening to opinions and then decisions are made without regard to community concerns, the entire process may be considered unfair or biased, even if it isn't. In order to gain and keep the trust of the community, project owners need to do what they say they are going to do, and for what they do to be genuine and transparent. Additionally, any promises made to protect public health and minimize any risk of disease need to be backed up by proof that they are being implemented. Monitoring programs should be properly funded and implemented, and the results published, not only to ensure public health, but also to reassure the community that their health is a priority. Without trying to hide any project risks, the benefits of the project can be promoted to develop a positive view of the project for the community. The benefits will be specific to a project, but will often include the achievement of water conservation objectives, the protection of public health and fairness of the project, as well as the security of irrigation water supply for farmers and an investment in the future of the community. Finally, the conception of a water reuse project may require a change of behaviour for certain stakeholders in order to realise the benefits of the project. Depending on the type of behaviour, this can be a crucial risk for the success of the project. Human behaviour is extremely complex and depends on numerous factors that are not always clear or knowable. Some behaviours may be able to be influenced, but there is a fine line between influence and coercion, and how any efforts at influence may be interpreted by the community in a negative way. Throughout the project planning and implementation phase, effort and resources need to be given to understanding how the project may require the change of certain behaviours. It's important to identify who may need to change their behaviour, how they may need to change, with what resources, and by when. For example, farmers that will be directly exposed to poor quality wastewater for irrigation may be required to wear protective clothing such as boots, gloves, and long waterproof pants. However, in hot and humid climates, it may not be realistic to expect that this type of requirement will be consistently followed, leading to elevated health risks if these measures are not followed. Stakeholders required to change their behaviour should have the opportunity to engage meaningfully in the project planning process to ensure their concerns are heard and to allow for modifications and improvements to the plans. If the required behaviour change does not occur, what would that mean for the project? Are there actions that can be taken, or training or other programs that can be implemented to improve the likelihood of successfully changing behaviours? And importantly, how will behaviour change and success of the project be evaluated and under what timeframe? Ensuring that these factors have been genuinely considered during the project will help to avoid any unwelcome negative outcomes. As mentioned, one of the first actions required for any project is to understand who are the stakeholders and how they will interact with the project. This is where stakeholder identification and mapping comes in. Many different frameworks exist for this task, two of which are shown on the screen. A common mapping tool used for stakeholders is the matrix based on interest and influence. This example is taken from a research study in the Bengal Delta in Bangladesh. Potential stakeholders can be placed on the matrix in line with how important the project will be for them or how much impact the project will have on them. This is the interest axis from low to high. And on the vertical axis in relation to how much influence they have over the project. This may be in terms of financing, decision-making, publicity, etc. We see that certain actors, such as farmers and academic institutions, may have a high interest in the project as it may directly impact their work. However, they usually do not have significant influence over projects. So the communication and engagement strategy for project managers would be to keep these stakeholders informed. This is in comparison with certain agencies or other actors that have high interest in the project and who also have a high influence level over the project. These actors should be engaged often and their relationship with the project should be managed closely. Members of the public and other actors that will not be significantly affected by the project and who don't have significant influence over the project can be monitored, whereas higher level actors at the national or wider regional level, such as government ministries as well as donor agencies and nearby industries, are placed into the keep satisfied category. The placement of stakeholders in these categories is just one example, and the level of interest or influence of a stakeholder may be different for your project. For example, even though citizens or members of the public may not have a high level of influence over a project, vocal opposition to a project from community groups can influence other actors, and this opposition can grow to become a risk for the project as a whole. It's also important to be consistent with the values of your organisation and any promises made to the community in relation to community engagement, and so simply monitoring the level of community satisfaction or dissatisfaction with a project may not be sufficient. As we said at the beginning of this presentation, community perceptions and acceptance are complicated and can depend on many different and interrelated factors and are an important determiner for the success of a project. This is why many projects take time and energy to develop public communications, engagement, and even participation strategies. The level of activity in this area is to be decided by the project managers in the context of each situation. Examples of different techniques that are used for different levels of public and community engagement are shown here. This includes things like fact sheets and websites for informing the public, right up to citizen juries, ballots, and delegated decision-making, where the community members participate in some of the decision-making aspects of the project. Taking an approach to involve and empower the community in some aspects of decision-making would change the matrix we saw before. For example, citizens and citizen groups would no longer simply be monitored, but engaged and managed closely.